The rain came down in sheets, turning Bourbon Street into a river of neon reflections. I pressed myself against the doorway of a closed antique shop, watching tourists sprint past with newspapers held over their heads, their laughter swallowed by thunder. My phone was dead. My wallet held exactly $12, and I was 3 miles from my apartment in the Marigny with no umbrella and shoes that were already soaked through. Perfect end to a perfect day. I'd spent the morning being rejected by my 4th gallery this month. Your work is technically proficient, Miss Delacroix, but it lacks commercial appeal. Translation: nobody wants to buy paintings of decomposing flowers and abandoned buildings. By afternoon, I'd been informed that my application for the Newcomb Art Fellowship had been denied. Again. The rain showed no signs of stopping. I was calculating whether I could afford a rideshare when a black town car pulled up to the curb directly in front of me, its headlights cutting through the downpour. The back window rolled down. "You look like you could use a ride." The voice was male, cultured, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. Not quite Southern, not quite something else. I peered into the car's interior. The man in the back seat was perhaps 40, with silver threading through dark hair, and a face that belonged in a portrait gallery. Sharp cheekbones, a Roman nose, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in a single sweep. "I don't accept rides from strangers," I said, though my soaked dress was plastered to my skin and I was shivering. Wise policy. He didn't smile, but something shifted in his expression, almost approval. "My name is Julian Archambeau. I own the gallery 3 blocks from here. I saw your portfolio review this morning at Galerie Nouvelle." My stomach dropped. He'd witnessed my humiliation. "Then you know my work lacks commercial appeal," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "I know Maurice Leblanc wouldn't recognize talented work if it set his gallery on fire." Julian leaned forward slightly. "Your piece, the one with the magnolia blossoms turning to ash, that was exceptional. The kind of work that makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to confront impermanence." I stared at him. No one had ever described my work that way. Most people just found it depressing. "Miss Delacroix, you're about to catch pneumonia standing in that doorway. I'm offering you a ride home and a chance to discuss your work with someone who actually understands it. You're free to refuse, but you should know that I don't make offers like this often." Thunder cracked overhead. Water was pooling in my shoes. And something about the way he looked at me, as if I were already something valuable, something worth protecting, made the decision for me. I opened the car door and slid inside. The interior smelled of leather and something woodsy, cedar perhaps. The seats were warm. Julian handed me a towel from a compartment I hadn't noticed. "Where do you live?" I gave him my address, acutely aware of how shabby my neighborhood would seem to a man who owned an art gallery in the quarter. As the driver pulled away from the curb, I dried my face and arms, trying to regain some composure. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked. "I didn't. I was on my way to a dinner meeting when I saw you standing there." He tilted his head slightly. "Though I had hoped to speak with you after the review, you left before I could approach you. I wasn't in the mood for more criticism." "What you experienced this morning wasn't criticism, it was cowardice." Julian's voice held an edge now. "Maurice only shows work he knows will sell to tourists looking for colorful paintings of jazz musicians and streetcars. He has no vision, no courage to champion artists who challenge viewers." "And you do?" "I collect what speaks to me, what has power. Your work has both." He paused. "Tell me, Miss Delacroix, what draws you to decay? To endings?" The question was too intimate for a stranger in a car, but something about the close quarters, the rain drumming on the roof, the warmth after being cold, it all loosened my tongue. "Because endings are honest," I said. "Everything beautiful eventually dies or crumbles or fades. We spend so much energy pretending otherwise, building monuments, preserving things in photographs, buying anti-aging creams. But entropy always wins. I paint the truth of that. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving my face. "You're a memento mori artist," he finally said. "Remember you must die. How very medieval of you." Is that a compliment or an insult? An observation. The ghost of a smile touched his lips, and a recognition that you understand something most people spend their lives avoiding. The car turned onto my street, past the corner store with its perpetually flickering sign and the row of shotgun houses badly in need of paint. I felt a flush of embarrassment at the contrast between this neighborhood and the one we'd just left. Julian showed no reaction. When we stopped in front of my building, a converted warehouse divided into artist studios with apartments above, he reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. "Come to my gallery tomorrow at 10. Bring your portfolio, all of it, not just the pieces you think are commercially viable. I want to see everything." I took the card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, Archambeau Gallery, with an address in the warehouse district. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you have a gift, and gifts should be nurtured, not dismissed." He held my gaze. "And because I've been looking for an artist like you for a very long time." There was something in the way he said it that sent a small shiver down my spine. Not fear, exactly, but a prickling awareness that this man saw me in a way no one else ever had. 10 o'clock, he repeated. "Don't make me come find you again, Miss Delacroix." I stepped out into the rain, which had softened to a drizzle, and watched the town car disappear around the corner. Only then did I realize I'd been holding my breath. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stood in my studio, really just the front room of my apartment with good light, staring at the canvases I'd completed over the past year. Flowers in various stages of rot, an empty birdcage with the door hanging open, a grand piano with weeds growing through its keys, a wedding dress yellowing in an attic trunk. Were they good enough? Were they what he wanted to see? And why did it matter so much what Julian Archambeau thought? My roommate Simone knocked on the doorframe at 2 a.m. She worked the late shift at a bar on Frenchman Street and had a gift for reading my moods. "You're spiraling," she announced, dropping onto my paint-stained couch. "What happened?" I told her about the car, the offer, the gallery appointment. Simone's eyes widened. "Julian Archambeau? Margot, do you know who that is?" "A gallery owner?" "He's not just a gallery owner. He's a collector, like serious money serious. Old New Orleans family, though he was gone for years. New York, Paris, London. Came back about 5 years ago and opened that gallery. Artists would kill for a show there." She paused. "He's also supposed to be intense, like obsessive about the work he acquires." "Obsessive how?" "Just what I've heard, that he doesn't just buy pieces, I don't know, almost studies them. Studies the artists." Simone shrugged. "Could be bullshit. But if he's interested in your work, Margot, that's huge." After she went to bed, I pulled up his gallery website on my laptop. The current exhibition featured abstract works in jewel tones. Beautiful, but not my style. I clicked through previous shows. Sculptures made from found objects. Photographs of urban ruins. A series of portraits where the subjects' faces were obscured by flowers. Everything had an edge to it. Nothing was safe or pretty or easily digestible. Maybe I did belong there. I arrived at the Archambeau Gallery at exactly 10, carrying my portfolio and trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. The building was a converted warehouse with exposed brick and soaring ceilings. Through the windows, I could see white walls hung with the jewel-toned abstracts from the website. A woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed, greeted me at the door. "Miss Delacroix? Mr. Archambeau is expecting you. Please follow me." She led me past the main gallery space to a private office in the back. The door was heavy wood, old and beautiful, probably salvaged from some demolished mansion. Julian stood as I entered. Today he wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, and I was suddenly conscious of my own outfit. Black jeans, a vintage blouse I'd found at a thrift store, boots that had seen better days. If he noticed, he gave no indication. "Thank you, Celeste," he said to the woman, who nodded and closed the door behind her, leaving us alone. The office was lined with bookshelves, filled not just with art books, but philosophy, poetry, history. One wall held framed photographs, his gallery openings, I assumed, though I noticed he was never the focus of the images, always slightly to the side, observing. "Show me," he said simply, gesturing to a large table cleared of everything else. I spread out my portfolio with shaking hands, photographs of my larger pieces, sketches, smaller completed works. Julian moved around the table slowly, studying each piece with an intensity that made me feel exposed. He said nothing for a long time, just looked, occasionally picking up a photograph to examine it more closely, tilting a small canvas to catch the light. Finally he spoke. "This one." He held up a photo of a piece I called The Anniversary, a dining room table set for two, with flowers that had been dead for weeks, food that had rotted, cobwebs stretching between the chandelier crystals. "Is the original for sale?" "Yes, all of them are." "Price?" I named a figure that seemed astronomical to me, but that Simone had insisted was fair. "Undervalued," Julian said, exactly as he had about the magnolia piece. "I'll give you double that, and I want the two others, the piano and the birdcage." I felt dizzy. The amount he was offering would cover 6 months of rent and supplies. "I also want to offer you something else." He set down the photograph and turned to face me fully. "A solo exhibition, 3 months from now, which gives you time to complete a full series. I'll provide a stipend to cover your living expenses so you can focus entirely on the work." "I don't understand," I managed. "You barely know my work. Why would you?" "Because I recognize something in it that's rare. A unflinching understanding of beauty and mortality intertwined." He took a step closer. "Most artists shy away from the darkness, or they wallow in it without nuance. You do neither. You paint the truth of impermanence with tenderness. That's extraordinary." No one had ever spoken about my work this way. I felt tears prick my eyes and blinked them back furiously. "There's a contract, of course," Julian continued, moving to his desk and withdrawing a folder. "Standard terms for gallery representation. You'll work exclusively with me for the next 2 years. I'll handle all sales, promotion, and exhibition arrangements. In return, I take 30% of sales and provide you with the resources you need to create." He handed me the contract. I scanned it, my heart pounding. It was generous. Far more generous than I'd heard other galleries offered emerging artists. "Why me?" I asked, looking up at him. "Honestly, there are dozens of talented artists in this city. Why choose me?" Julian was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Because when I look at your work," he finally said, "I see someone who understands that beauty is most profound in its transience, someone who isn't afraid to bear witness to endings. That kind of courage is rare, Miss Delacroix, and I've been searching for it." There was something in his eyes as he said it, a hunger that went beyond mere professional interest. It should have unsettled me. Instead, I felt something unfold in my chest, a desperate gratitude at being seen, truly seen, for the first time. "I need to read this carefully," I said, indicating the contract. "Have a lawyer look at it." "Of course. Take your time." But he smiled as he said it, as if he already knew my answer. "Though I should mention that the stipend begins the moment you sign, $1,500 a month, plus a budget for materials." $1,500 a month. I was currently living on half that, cobbled together from a part-time job at a coffee shop and the occasional sale at local art markets. "I'll have an answer by Monday," I heard myself say. "I look forward to it." Julian extended his hand. When I shook it, his grip was firm, warm, and lasted a fraction too long. "I have a good feeling about this partnership, Miss Delacroix. A very good feeling indeed." I took the contract to a lawyer friend of Simone's, who looked it over and found nothing suspicious. "Standard terms," he said, "actually quite favorable for an emerging artist." On Monday morning, I returned to the gallery and signed. Julian's smile when I did was the first fully unguarded expression I'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. "Excellent," he said, countersigning with a flourish. "Now, let's discuss your exhibition. I'm thinking we call it Vanitas, a series exploring the theme of impermanence through different stages of decay, 12 to 15 pieces." We spent the next 2 hours discussing concepts, compositions, color palettes. Julian had ideas, strong ones, but he framed them as suggestions, always deferring to my artistic vision. It was intoxicating, having someone so invested in my work. As I was leaving, he stopped me at the door. "Miss Delacroix, Margot, if I may, one more thing. I'm hosting a private dinner on Saturday evening for several collectors. I'd like you to attend. Nothing formal, just an opportunity for you to meet the people who will be seeing your work." "I don't know if I started to say, thinking of my limited wardrobe, my lack of experience with that kind of social situation. "You'll be perfect," he interrupted gently. "Just be yourself. Though if you need something to wear, Celeste can help arrange that. We keep a relationship with several boutiques for events." "That's not necessary. Consider it part of the gallery's investment in your career. These events are important, and first impressions matter." He pulled out his phone. "What's your size?" I told him, feeling awkward, but he was already typing a message. "Done. Celeste will have options sent to your apartment by Thursday. Choose whatever you're comfortable in." It was happening so fast. Too fast, maybe. But Julian's confidence was infectious, and the part of me that had been struggling for so long, barely scraping by while other artists got shows and grants and recognition, that part wanted to grab this opportunity with both hands. "Saturday," I agreed. "What time?" 7. I'll send a car for you at 6:30. He touched my shoulder briefly, a gesture that was almost paternal. "This is going to be remarkable, Margot. I can feel it." The packages arrived Thursday afternoon. 3 dress boxes, each containing something more beautiful than anything I'd ever owned. I tried them all on, feeling like an imposter, before settling on a deep burgundy dress with a high neck and long sleeves, elegant without being flashy. Simone whistled when she saw it. "You look like you belong in his world," she said. I wasn't sure if that was true, but when the car arrived on Saturday, not the town car from before, but an actual vintage Rolls-Royce, I felt a strange sense of rightness climbing into it, as if I were stepping into a life I was meant to have. Julian's home was in the Garden District, a Greek Revival mansion set back from the street behind a riot of tropical plants. Lights glowed in the windows, and I could hear music as I approached the front door. Something classical, played on piano. Julian himself answered, dressed in a dark suit that made his silver-threaded hair look distinguished rather than aging. "Margot," he said, his eyes traveling over me with clear appreciation. "You look stunning. Come in." The interior was exactly what I'd expected. High ceilings, crown molding, antique furniture that had probably been in his family for generations. But the walls were covered with art. Not just decoration, but carefully curated pieces that showed a collector's eye. I recognized work by several local artists I admired, but there were others I didn't know. Challenging pieces that demanded attention. "Your home is incredible," I said. "It's just a house." He placed a hand on my lower back, guiding me deeper into the home. The art is what makes it worth living in. There were perhaps a dozen people in the main parlor, all dressed impeccably, all holding cocktails and speaking in the low murmur of the wealthy and cultured. Julian made introductions, and I tried to remember names I knew I'd forget immediately. These were serious collectors. A petroleum heiress who owned homes in 3 countries. A tech entrepreneur who'd sold his company for hundreds of millions. A retired diplomat with walls full of African art. They all seemed to know Julian well, greeting him with the easy familiarity of old friends. "This is Margot Delacroix," he said, keeping me close to his side. "The artist I told you about. She'll be showing at the gallery in February." The interest in their eyes was immediate and unnerving. They asked questions about my work, my influences, my process. I answered as best I could, trying to sound confident and knowledgeable rather than like the struggling artist I'd been 2 weeks ago. Julian never left my side, occasionally adding context to my answers, guiding the conversation when I faltered. His presence was steadying, but also something else. Possessive, maybe. The way he kept his hand on my back, the way he steered me through the room. It felt like I was being displayed. His newest acquisition. The thought should have bothered me. Instead, I felt a dark thrill at being claimed this way. Dinner was served in a formal dining room at a table that could have seated 20. The food was exceptional, the wine even more so. Julian sat at the head of the table with me at his right hand, a position that didn't go unnoticed by the other guests. "How did you discover Margot's work?" the petroleum heiress asked Julian over the main course. "I saw her portfolio at a gallery review," he said, "and I knew immediately that she was special. Sometimes you simply recognize talent when you see it." "Julian has always had an eye for potential," the diplomat said, raising his glass. "I've watched him build artists' careers from nothing. If he believes in you, Miss Delacroix, you're in very good hands." They all drank to that, and I felt the weight of their expectations settle over me like a mantle. After dinner, Julian showed a small group of us his private collection in the upstairs gallery. It was breathtaking. Museum-quality pieces, some by artists I'd only seen in books. But what struck me most was how he spoke about each work. He didn't just discuss technique or historical context. He talked about what drew him to each piece, what made it essential to own. "I don't collect casually," he explained to the group. "Each piece here represents something I couldn't live without once I'd seen it, something that changed how I understood art or beauty or truth." His eyes found mine across the room. That's why I knew I had to work with Margot. Her work doesn't just show me something beautiful, it shows me something true. The evening ended near midnight. As the other guests departed, Julian walked me to the waiting car. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You were magnificent. They'll all be at your opening and they'll all want to buy." "I was nervous," I admitted. "You didn't show it." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture surprisingly intimate. "You belong in that world, Margot. You just didn't know it yet." In the car, I found a note on the seat beside me, written in Julian's precise handwriting. "You were the most captivating person in that room tonight. Not because of the dress, though you wore it beautifully, but because you have substance beneath the surface. That's what makes you irreplaceable. J." I read it 3 times during the drive home, my heart beating faster each time. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. I worked in my studio every day, sometimes for 12 or 14 hours, lost in the creative flow. Julian visited regularly, always calling first, always bringing coffee or pastries, always staying to discuss the work in progress. His feedback was invaluable. He had an eye for composition I'd never encountered before, could identify exactly what was working and what wasn't. Under his guidance, my pieces became stronger, more focused, more powerful. But it wasn't just his artistic input. He began handling other aspects of my life too. When I mentioned my studio was too cold to work comfortably, He had a heating system installed the next day. When I complained about my ancient laptop crashing, a new MacBook Pro appeared. When I said I was having trouble sleeping, worried about the exhibition, he arranged for a doctor friend to prescribe something to help. "You need to be able to focus on your work," he said each time. "Let me handle the rest." It was seductive, being taken care of this way. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly stressed about money or logistics. I could just create. Simone noticed the change. "You're barely home anymore," she said one evening when I came back to pick up fresh clothes. "And when you are here, you're different. Distant." "I'm just focused on the exhibition. It's more than that." She studied me carefully. "Margot, you know I'm happy for you. This opportunity is incredible, but be careful with Julian." "Careful how?" "Just don't lose yourself in his vision for you. Make sure this is still your art, your career, not his." I bristled at the implication. "He's helping me. He believes in my work." "I know. I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize you've handed over more than you meant to." We didn't fight exactly, but the conversation left a sour note between us. I left earlier than I'd planned, heading back to my studio where Julian had said he might stop by. He arrived with dinner from my favorite Vietnamese restaurant, the one I'd mentioned liking weeks ago. The fact that he'd remembered touched me. "You look tired," he said, setting out the food. "Are you sleeping?" "Not as much as I should. The exhibition is important, but not at the cost of your health." He pulled out a chair for me. "Sit, eat. Then I want you to go home and rest. I need to finish the rose piece. It will still be here tomorrow." His voice was firm. "You're no good to the work if you collapse from exhaustion." Something about his tone rankled. "I know my own limits." "Do you?" He moved closer, his expression serious. "Because from where I'm standing, you're pushing yourself too hard, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you damage yourself." "That's not your decision to make." "Actually, it is." He said it calmly, matter-of-factly. "You signed a contract with me, Margot. Your work, your career, your success. They're all tied to me now, which means I have a vested interest in making sure you're healthy enough to deliver what you've promised." The words hung between us. There was truth in them, but also something that felt like ice water down my spine. "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. Julian caught my wrist, not hard, but firmly. "Don't run. Not from me." "I'm not running. I just need some air." He held my gaze for a long moment, then released me. "All right, but take the food with you. And Margot?" I paused at the door. "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference." I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. The night before my exhibition opening, I couldn't sleep despite the pills Julian's doctor had prescribed. I kept thinking about the past 3 months, how seamlessly I'd transitioned from struggling artist to Julian's protégée, how my entire life now revolved around his gallery, his collectors, his vision. At 3 a.m. I got up and walked through my apartment. It barely looked lived in anymore. Most of my time was spent at the studio Julian had insisted on renting for me. A beautiful space in the warehouse district, 2 floors below his gallery. Convenient, he'd said, so I could work late and not have to commute. I'd agreed because it made sense, but now I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd spent a full day away from his orbit. My phone buzzed with a text. "Julian, can't sleep either. Are you nervous about tomorrow? How did he know I was awake?" "A little," I typed back. "Don't be. You're going to be extraordinary. I'll see you at noon for final setup." I stared at the phone, at the presumption that he'd see me, that I'd be there. When had I stopped making my own schedule? But I was there at noon, of course. Because the exhibition was important. Because Julian had invested so much in me. Because I owed him. The gallery looked stunning. My 15 paintings hung in a carefully orchestrated sequence that told a story of beauty and decay, of things cherished and things lost. Julian had arranged everything perfectly, down to the lighting that made certain details glow, while leaving others in shadow. "It's perfect," I said, meaning it. "You're perfect." He came up behind me, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "This is going to change everything for you, Margot. After tonight, you'll never struggle again. Thanks to you. Thanks to your talent. I just provided the platform." His hand settled on my shoulders. "But yes, thanks to me too. We're partners in this. Remember that." I wanted to lean back into him, to accept the comfort of his certainty. But something held me rigid. "I need to get ready," I said, stepping away. "The opening starts in 4 hours." I saw something flicker across his face, disappointment maybe, or anger, but it was gone too quickly to identify. "Of course. I'll send the car for you at 5:30. "I can get here on my own." "Not tonight. Tonight you arrive properly, as the artist you are." It wasn't a suggestion. The opening was everything Julian had promised and more. The gallery was packed with collectors, critics, and artists. Everyone wanted to talk to me, to understand the work, to know what I'd create next. Several pieces sold within the first hour, including the anniversary for 3 times what Julian had originally paid for it. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I felt like I was watching everything from a distance, like I was one of my own subjects, beautiful on the surface, rotting underneath. Julian was everywhere, orchestrating conversations, introducing me to important people, making sure my wine glass was always full. He was brilliant at this, I realized, at creating the perception of success, of value, at creating me as I was tonight, polished, articulate, marketable. Near the end of the evening, he pulled me aside into his private office. 9 pieces sold, he said, pure satisfaction in his voice. And I have commitments on 3 more. Margot, this is unprecedented for a first solo show. It's incredible, I agreed, feeling like I should be more excited. Thank you for making this happen. We made it happen. He poured 2 glasses of expensive cognac and handed me one. To partnerships. We drank, and the cognac burned pleasantly down my throat. I've been thinking about what comes next, Julian continued. You'll need to complete at least 10 more pieces for the collectors who missed out tonight. And I want to submit your work to several prestigious competitions. By this time next year, you could be showing in New York or Paris. That's amazing. It is. But it means we need to formalize some aspects of our arrangement. He pulled out another contract from his desk drawer. This is an extension of your original agreement. It gives me exclusive worldwide representation for 5 years instead of 2, and first right of refusal on any pieces you create during that time. I took the contract with numb fingers. 5 years? Think of it as security. I'm committing to building your career long-term, which means I need assurance that my investment is protected. He smiled. This is standard for artists at your level. But I'm not at that level. You made this level. Exactly, which is why you owe me the loyalty of seeing this through. His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. I've given you everything, Margot. I found you in the rain. I gave you a chance when no one else would. Don't you think I deserve some commitment in return? The words echoed something in my chest. Found you. Gave you. Owe me. When had his generosity become a debt? I need to think about this, I said, setting down the unsigned contract. Julian's expression darkened. There's nothing to think about. This is how the art world works. If you want to continue your success, you need representation you can trust. And I do trust you, but 5 years is a long time to commit. After everything I've done for you. His voice was quiet now, dangerously so. After I paid for your studio, your supplies, your exhibition, after I opened doors you couldn't have opened yourself, after I made you into someone people want to know, this is how you repay that? I'm not trying to be ungrateful. Then sign it. Prove that you understand what we have here. He pushed the contract toward me. Or prove that Simone was right about you all along. I froze. What does Simone have to do with this? She called me last week, said she was worried I was controlling you, that you'd lost your independence. He laughed, but it held no warmth. As if creating art in a comfortable studio with no financial worries is somehow worse than starving in obscurity. Some people can't recognize a gift when it's given to them. The thought of Simone calling him, of him knowing about her concerns, made my skin crawl. How long had he been monitoring my life this closely? I should go, I said, standing. It's been a long day. Sit down. Not a request, an order. Excuse me? Sit down. Julian's face was calm, but his eyes were ice. We're not finished talking about this. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I thought about the studio he'd rented, the supplies he'd bought, the connections he'd made, the career he'd built for me from nothing. What would I be without him? Where would I go? I sat. Julian smiled, all warmth again. Good girl. Now let's discuss this rationally. The contract is for your benefit as much as mine. It protects you, ensures that you'll have my support for years to come. Isn't that what you want? I stopped, realizing I didn't know how to finish that sentence. I want to read it carefully, have someone look at it. Someone like your lawyer friend? He poured more cognac. The one who told you the first contract was fine? You can certainly do that. But Margot, you need to understand something. He leaned forward, close enough that I could see the silver in his eyes, like coins at the bottom of a well. I've made you. Your work hangs on these walls because I chose it. Collectors want it because I told them it's valuable. Critics care because I arrange for them to care. Without me, you're just another artist with depressing paintings that nobody wants to buy. Each word landed like a stone. Heavy. True. That's not to diminish your talent, he continued, voice softening. You're extraordinarily gifted. But talent means nothing in this world without someone to champion it. And I'm that someone. I saw you when you were invisible. I gave you everything you needed to succeed. Don't throw that away, because you're frightened of commitment. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together to hide it. Can I have until Monday? I asked. To think about it? Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Monday. But Margot. I looked up. Don't disappoint me. I don't respond well to disappointment. It was only later, in the car driving away from the gallery, that I realized he'd never actually threatened me. Never raised his voice or made explicit demands. He hadn't needed to. He'd just made me understand, with perfect clarity, exactly how much power he held over my life, and how easily he could take it all away. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I went to Simone's bar, waited until her shift ended at 2 a.m., and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she took both my hands in hers. Margot, honey, you need to get out of this. Out of what? He hasn't done anything wrong. He's been nothing but generous. He's been systematically isolating you, making you dependent on him, controlling every aspect of your life while making you think it's for your own good. Simone's grip tightened. That's not generosity. That's manipulation. But everything he said is true. Without him, you'd still be an artist. Maybe struggling but free. Now look at yourself. When's the last time you made a decision without considering what Julian would think? When's the last time you spent a day without him knowing where you were? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. He's not in love with your art, Margot. He's in love with owning you. Simone's voice was fierce. And if you sign that contract, you're giving him legal permission to do it for 5 more years. I don't know what to do, I whispered. If I refuse, he'll ruin me. He said as much. Did he? Or did he make you think that while never actually saying it? She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my cousin. She's a lawyer who specializes in contract law, and then we're going to figure out how to get you out of this. Simone's cousin, Angela, met us for coffee the next morning. She was sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, listening to my story with the detached focus of someone who'd heard versions of it before. Classic coercive control, she said when I finished. He's not your partner, he's your handler. And that first contract you signed, let me see it. I pulled up the digital copy on my phone. Angela read through it carefully, her expression growing more serious. This is worse than I thought. This clause here, it gives him rights not just to represent your work, but to control when and where it's shown. And this one? He can prevent you from creating work outside his approval. Did you understand that when you signed? He said it was standard. It's not. It's a cage disguised as opportunity. She looked at me directly. The good news is that there are clauses here that probably wouldn't hold up in court. The bad news is that fighting him would be expensive, public, and could damage your reputation before your career even gets started. So I'm trapped. Not necessarily, but you need to be smart about this. Angela pulled out a notepad. Tell me everything you know about Julian Archambeau. His business, his history, his other artists, everything. I told her what I knew, which wasn't much. Julian was intensely private about his personal life. I knew he'd lived abroad, that he came from old New Orleans money, that he had connections throughout the art world. But specifics? Those had always been vague. I'll do some research, Angela said. In the meantime, don't sign anything else. And Margot, be careful. Men like this don't let go easily. On Monday morning, I returned to the gallery with my decision. Julian was in his office, examining a new acquisition, a sculpture of a woman with her hands covering her face. Margot. He stood smiling. I was hoping you'd come early. We have much to discuss. I can't sign the new contract, I said without preamble. The terms are too restrictive. His smile didn't falter. I see. And who helped you reach this conclusion? Your roommate? Her lawyer cousin? Cold washed over me. How did you... I protect my investments. That includes knowing when someone is trying to interfere with them. He came around the desk, moving into my space. Did Angela tell you about the clause that gives me rights to sue for damages if you breach our agreement? Did she explain how expensive that litigation would be for someone with your limited resources? You're threatening me. I'm explaining reality. His voice was calm, almost gentle. You signed a contract, Margot. Legal obligations exist, whether you like them or not. If you refuse to honor our agreement, I'll be forced to take action. I'll sue for the value of the exhibition, the studio rent, the materials, the promotional costs. Conservatively, you'd owe me about $200,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I don't have that kind of money. I know, which means you'd declare bankruptcy. And with that on your record, no gallery would touch you. Your career would be over before it began. He tilted his head. Is that really what you want? To throw everything away because you let other people poison you against me? They didn't poison me. They helped me see... See what? That I gave you everything you ever wanted? That I believed in you when no one else did? His voice rose slightly. I made you, Margot. Everything you have, everything you are in this world, it exists because I chose you. Don't confuse me with your enemy." "Then let me go," I said, hating how my voice shook. "If you really care about my art, my career, let me have the freedom to—" "Freedom?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You want freedom? Go back to your moldy apartment and your part-time job and your paintings that nobody wanted to buy. That's the freedom you're so desperate for." He was right. That was the horror of it. Every word he said was true. I had been nothing before him, invisible, struggling, failing, but I'd also been mine. "I need time," I managed, "to think about all of this." Julian studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well. Take a week. Think carefully about what you're risking." "But Margot?" I met his eyes. "Don't test me. I've been patient with your uncertainty, your doubts, but my patience has limits, and you really don't want to discover what I'm like when those limits are reached." I spent that week doing research, real research, not just about contracts, but about Julian himself. What I found chilled me. He'd had 3 previous artists under exclusive contracts. All 3 had shown initial success under his representation. All 3 had eventually tried to leave. One had disappeared from the art world entirely, last known to be working retail in Oregon. Another had moved to Europe and now created under a different name. The third had died 2 years ago, officially a suicide, though there were whispers online that suggested otherwise. I found interviews with gallery owners who'd worked with Julian before he opened his own space. They described him as brilliant, but controlling. Obsessive was a word that came up repeatedly. One dealer mentioned that Julian didn't just collect art, he consumed it, becoming fixated on pieces to the point of buying them at any cost. But most disturbing were the older articles, from 15 years ago, about a young artist named Claire Dupont. She'd been 23 when she met Julian at a gallery opening in Paris. He'd championed her work, launched her career, become her patron. 2 years later, she'd vanished. The case had never been solved. Julian had been questioned, but never charged. He'd claimed they'd had a falling out over her work, that she'd left Paris without telling him where she was going. The police had found no evidence of foul play, but they'd also never found Claire. I stared at her photograph on my laptop screen, a beautiful young woman with dark hair and thoughtful eyes, standing in front of one of her paintings. The painting showed a woman trapped in a glass case, beautiful and perfectly preserved, like a butterfly pinned to velvet. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop. I needed to tell someone. My phone rang. Julian. I stared at it, watching it vibrate against the table. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, I answered. "Margot." His voice was warm, concerned. "I haven't heard from you in days. I'm starting to worry." "I've been thinking, like you told me to. And I need to ask you something." I steadied my breath. "Claire Dupont, what happened to her?" The silence on the other end lasted several heartbeats too long. "Where did you hear that name?" His voice was different now. Flat, careful. "Does it matter?" "It matters because Claire has nothing to do with us. What we have is entirely different." "Is it? Because it seems like I'm following the same pattern. The young artist you discover, champion, control. I never controlled Claire. She was unstable, paranoid. She threw away everything I gave her because she couldn't handle success." His words came faster now. "Is that what you want? To end up like her, afraid of your own shadow, running from the best thing that ever happened to you?" "What really happened to her, Julian?" "She left. That's what happened. She made her choice, and she left." A pause. "Don't make the same mistake, Margot. Don't let fear destroy what we've built together." "We haven't built anything together. You built a cage and convinced me it was a palace." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I needed to leave. Needed to get out of New Orleans, away from Julian, away from everything he'd created around me. But first, I needed my paintings back. I went to the gallery that night, after hours, using the key Julian had given me months ago for late-night studio access. The building was dark, empty. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floors as I made my way to the storage room where unsold pieces were kept. 3 of my paintings from the exhibition were there, carefully wrapped and catalogued. I pulled them out, my heart racing, knowing I was stealing what was technically Julian's property under our contract, not caring anymore. I was carrying the second painting toward the exit when the lights came on. Julian stood in the doorway, perfectly calm, perfectly still. "I knew you'd come," he said. "You're so predictable, Margot. So transparent." I clutched the painting to my chest. "Get out of my way. Those aren't yours. They belong to the gallery. To me. They're my work. Work you created under my patronage. With materials I provided, in a studio I rented. Read your contract." He took a step closer. "Everything you make while under my representation belongs to me. You signed away those rights. Then I'll buy them back, however much you want. They're not for sale. Not to you." Another step. "You're trying to leave me, Margot. After everything I've invested, everything I've given. Did you really think I'd just let you walk away? You can't keep me here, can I?" His smile was terrible. "You have no money, no reputation without me, no career. Where will you go? What will you do? Who will you be without the identity I created for you?" "I'll be myself. That's enough. Yourself." He said it like a curse. The struggling artist nobody wanted. The invisible girl I found in the rain. That's who you want to be? Yes. I meant it. I'd rather be invisible than owned. Something flickered across his face. Rage, maybe, or pain. It was there and gone so quickly I couldn't identify it. "You're making a serious mistake. Then it's my mistake to make." I moved toward the door, the painting still clutched in my arms. Julian didn't physically stop me, but his voice followed me out. "You'll regret this. When you're back to being nobody, struggling to pay rent, watching other artists succeed with opportunities you threw away, you'll remember this moment, and you'll regret it." I didn't look back. I left New Orleans that night. Simone helped me pack a single bag, store the rest of my belongings, and drove me to the Greyhound station. "Where will you go?" she asked, hugging me tight. "North, somewhere cold, somewhere new." I pulled back, trying to smile. "Somewhere he won't think to look. He'll try to find you." "I know." I picked up my bag. "But I'll be gone by then." The bus ride to Chicago took 23 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching the landscape change, feeling like I was shedding a skin. Julian called 17 times. I blocked his number after the 5th voicemail, each one progressively angrier, more desperate. The last one I listened to ended with, "You belong to me, Margot. You'll always belong to me. Distance won't change that." I deleted it and stared at my reflection in the dark window. The face looking back was thinner than it had been 3 months ago, paler, with shadows under the eyes. But it was mine, truly mine, for the first time in months. Chicago in November was brutally cold. I found a room in a boarding house on the north side, took a job washing dishes at a diner, and started painting again in the corners of my room. The work was different now, harder-edged, angrier. I painted cages made of gold, beautiful prisons, collectors with empty eyes examining human hearts like merchandise. I painted Julian, over and over, though I never signed those pieces. They were just for me. Exorcisms. 2 months after I left New Orleans, Angela called. "He's trying to sue you. she said without preamble. For breach of contract and theft of property. But Margot, I found something. Something that might help. What? A woman in London. She was one of his artists 15 years ago. She's willing to talk about what happened to her. Willing to testify that his contracts are coercive and unenforceable because they're signed under duress. My heart began to pound. And Claire Dupont? Still missing, but I found her sister. She's never believed Julian's story about Claire leaving voluntarily. She's been investigating privately for years. Angela paused. She wants to meet you. She thinks you might know something that could help. I don't know anything. Maybe not consciously. But you spent months with him, Margot. You might have seen something, heard something that could matter. I thought about the way Julian looked at art, at me, the hunger in his eyes when he spoke about collection, about ownership, about things he couldn't live without once he'd seen them. Tell her I'll meet with her, I said. Claire's sister, Marie, flew to Chicago a week later. We met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, neutral territory. She looked like her sister, the same dark hair, the same thoughtful eyes. But where Claire had looked dreamy in photographs, Marie was sharp, focused, determined. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she said, sitting across from me. I'm not sure how I can help. Tell me about his office, his home. Did you ever see anything that seemed out of place? Any locked rooms, storage spaces, places he didn't want you to go? I thought back, trying to remember. His home had a wine cellar. He mentioned it but never showed it to me. Said it was climate-controlled for his collection. Wine collection? I assumed so, but now... I trailed off, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. He talked about Claire once. When I asked what happened to her, he said she couldn't handle success, that she was unstable. Marie's jaw tightened. Claire wasn't unstable. She was careful, organized. She kept detailed journals. She pulled out her phone, showed me a scanned image of handwriting. This is from her last entry, 2 days before she disappeared. Julian showed me the wine cellar today, but there was no wine, only paintings. Dozens of them, stacked against the walls. When I asked why he kept them down there, he said some art is too precious to share. That real collectors keep their most valuable pieces hidden, just for themselves. The coffee shop seemed to tilt around me. What kind of paintings? She didn't say. But Margot, I've tracked down 3 other artists who worked with Julian. All of them disappeared. All of them created their best work under his patronage, and all of them vanished before they could move on to other galleries. You think he killed them. I think he couldn't let them go. I think they became part of his private collection. She leaned forward. Will you help me prove it? I thought about the contract I'd signed, the cage he'd built. The way he'd looked at me when I tried to leave, like I was a possession that had forgotten its place. Yes, I said. Tell me what you need me to do. The plan was dangerous, possibly illegal, almost certainly stupid. But 3 weeks later, I was on a plane back to New Orleans, wearing a wire and carrying a fake portfolio, with a story about wanting to apologize and make things right. Julian agreed to meet me at his home. Of course he did. He opened the door himself, looking exactly as I remembered, distinguished, magnetic, dangerous. Margot. His voice was warm, but his eyes were cold. I knew you'd come back. I made a mistake, I said, the words tasting like ash. Leaving you, throwing away everything we built. I want to make it right. Do you? Not a question. He studied me like I was a painting he was considering purchasing. Come in, let's talk. The house was exactly as I remembered. Beautiful, suffocating. He led me to the parlor, poured brandy I didn't drink, sat too close on the antique sofa. I have new work, I said. opening my portfolio with shaking hands. Better than before. I think you'll see how much I've grown. Julian looked through the fake pieces, digital prints of work I'd done in Chicago, not originals. He was quiet for a long time. These are different, he finally said. Angrier. What inspired them? Pain, loss, regret. I met his eyes. Missing you, liar. He said it softly, almost tenderly. You don't miss me. You're afraid of me. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you're sitting, poised to run. So why are you really here, Margot? My pulse hammered against the wire taped to my ribs. I told you, I want to make things right. No, you want something else. He set down the portfolio. Did Claire's sister send you? Marie? She's been sniffing around for years, trying to prove something that isn't true. I don't know what you're talking about. Another lie. He stood, walked to the window, his back to me. Claire was special, like you, talented, beautiful, mine. But she wanted to leave. Said she'd found another gallery, another patron, as if she could just walk away from everything I'd given her. What did you do? I whispered. He turned back to me and his expression was almost sad. I showed her my real collection, the one I keep for myself. The pieces too precious to share with the world. And I explained that she would always be part of that collection, one way or another. Julian. She chose another way. She tried to run, just like you did, but I couldn't let her go. She was mine, Margot. I'd invested too much, so I made sure she'd stay mine forever. He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly. Where is she? In the wine cellar, where all my most precious pieces are kept. He smiled, and it was the most terrible thing I'd ever seen. Would you like to see? Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I thought of Marie, of the other artists who'd disappeared, of the chance to finally give them justice. Yes, I said, show me. The wine cellar was accessed through a door in the kitchen, hidden behind a false panel. Stone steps led down into darkness. Julian went first, turning on lights as he descended. The space was large, climate-controlled, and absolutely silent, and he'd been telling the truth. There was no wine, just paintings. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, stacked against the walls, hung on special racks, stored in archival boxes. I recognized some of the artists, pieces that should have been in museums or private collections, but that had been reported stolen or lost. And in the center of the room, lit by a single spotlight, was a portrait I recognized from photographs. Claire Dupont's final self-portrait, the one she'd been working on when she disappeared. She never finished it, Julian said softly, moving to stand beside the painting. I completed it myself, tried to capture her essence the way she would have. I think I succeeded. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the horror of what I was seeing. Where is she, Julian? Where's Claire? He looked at me with something like pity. She's everywhere in this room. Her work, her vision, her soul. What more does Marie need? This is immortality, Margot. This is what I offer to the artists I choose. A place where their work will be cherished forever, where it will never be sold or traded or forgotten. That's not immortality. It's a tomb. It's preservation. He moved closer to me. And now you've seen it, you understand. You can't leave, Margot. Not now. Not with this knowledge. I backed toward the stairs. People know I'm here. If I don't come out, who knows? Marie? The police won't believe her any more than they believed her the first time. Your roommate? She thinks you went to Chicago. He kept advancing, steady and calm. No one is coming for you, Margot. Just like no one came for Claire. My back hit the stone wall. Julian was between me and the stairs now. "I gave you everything," he said, almost conversationally. "I lifted you from obscurity. I made you matter, and you threw it back in my face. But I'm a forgiving man. You can stay here, in my collection. You can be precious forever." "I'm not art," I said, voice shaking. "I'm a person. The best art is always personal." He reached for me. I ducked under his arm, ran for the stairs, heard him behind me, his footsteps faster than mine. My hand closed on the railing just as his closed on my wrist. "Don't make this difficult," he said, pulling me back. I screamed, loud as I could, hoping the wire was picking it up, hoping someone was listening. Julian's other hand clamped over my mouth. "Quiet. Nobody can hear you anyway. The cellar is soundproofed." He was dragging me back down the stairs when the door above burst open. Police flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Marie was with them, and Angela, and a dozen officers in tactical gear. Julian froze, his hand still on my wrist. "Let her go," one of the officers commanded. "Now." For a moment I thought he wouldn't. Thought he'd rather pull me down into his collection than let me escape. Then his grip loosened. I pulled free, stumbling up the stairs and into Marie's arms. Behind me, I heard Julian's voice, calm even now. "You can't prove anything. These are legally acquired pieces. My private collection." But as the officers spread through the wine cellar, cataloging the art, they found something else. Behind a false wall, hidden deeper in the cellar, a small room, with a cot, and chains, and journals, Claire's journals, years' worth of entries after she'd supposedly disappeared. The last one was dated 3 months ago. They found Claire's remains 2 days later, buried in the garden of Julian's home. She'd been alive for 8 years after her disappearance, kept in that room, forced to create art for Julian's private collection, never allowed to leave. She'd died of an infection that could have been easily treated if he'd taken her to a hospital. But that would have meant letting her go. The other artists were never found. But based on Claire's journals, there had been at least 2 others kept in that room at various times. Julian had moved their bodies when they died, buried them in places only he knew. He was arrested, charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, and multiple counts of murder. His trial made international news. The art world reeled. I testified, told the court everything about the contracts, the control, the way he'd made me feel owned. Marie testified too, her voice steady and strong, finally getting justice for her sister. Julian never showed emotion during the trial. He sat perfectly still, watching the proceedings like they were a performance he was evaluating. Only once did he look directly at me, and his expression was almost disappointed, as if I'd failed some test he'd set. The jury found him guilty on all counts, life without parole. As they led him away, he turned back one last time. "You were supposed to be perfect," he called to me. "I chose you. You were supposed to be mine forever." "I was never yours," I said back. "None of us were. We're not art, Julian. We're people." He smiled then, sad and terrible. "That's where you're wrong, Margot. Everyone is art. You just have to know how to look at them." I stayed in Chicago after the trial. Built a new life, a new career. Painted when I wanted to, what I wanted to, answered to no one. My work changed. I still painted decay and endings, but now I painted beginnings too. Flowers blooming through cracks in concrete, light streaming through broken windows, beauty that persisted despite damage. Eventually I had another exhibition, a small gallery, nothing fancy. The owner took a fair commission and never tried to control what I created. The opening was modest. Friends came, a few collectors, some local critics. No champagne towers or black-tie dress codes. Just people who genuinely loved art. Simone flew up from New Orleans for it. We stood together, looking at my favorite piece from the series, a painting of a woman breaking free from a gold frame, the gilt cracking and falling away as she stepped forward into blank canvas. "You did it," Simone said. "You got away." "We did it," I corrected. "You and Marie and Angela. I couldn't have done it alone." "But you were brave enough to try. That's what mattered." Later, after everyone had left, I stood alone in the gallery looking at the paintings. My paintings. Mine. Not anyone's investment or collection or property. Just art, created freely, by an artist who belonged only to herself. That was the real immortality, I thought. Not being preserved like a butterfly pinned to velvet, but living freely, creating freely, changing and growing and eventually, yes, decaying. Because endings were honest, but so were new beginnings. And I was finally, truly, free to have both, end.